Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Hemsel. I am the founder of Women with Guts Productions. I am so happy to be here with a very gutsy person today. She is a model, an activist, an author. Her name is Christine Handy, and she's going to be telling us a lot about her journey today towards health and wellness and breaking up some beauty myths. So, Christine, thank you so much for being here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, enjoying New York City, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy. I want to tell everyone really quickly how we met. I've worked with another wonderful woman who's a cancer survivor, Dr. Milagros Hernandez, the first doctor to create a CBD skincare line. And I reached out to someone and we got connected. And she said, "This really resonates with me. You've got to meet this woman." And so she connected us, and we did meet. And we really hit it off. And I was inspired by you. I've been inspired by Dr. Hernandez. I'm inspired by all women who take their journey and then actually help others with it, because it's one thing to go through a painful journey on your own. It's another thing to be vulnerable and share your painful journey. So I really want to thank you for being here and for sharing your journey, right?
Thank
Um,
you.
and I want to welcome all of you who are here, making the time to be here with this live interview. Thank you for being here. Especially want to thank all the men who are here and listening, because breast cancer is not just a women's issue, right? This is not just a women's issue. So before I kind of get back to talking to Christine about her journey, I want to remind people I started Women with Guts because I grew up kind of being a little bullied and made fun of because of my weight. And I really feel that beauty doesn't have to be tied to our physical shells at all. So that's what started me. I'd like to hear more about you, Christine, though, and how you grew up and what it was like, kind of your ideas of beauty and life as you were growing up, and maybe tell me more about your family too.
Well, I grew up in the Midwest. I was born in Chicago and lived there till I was about 6 years old, and then grew up in St. Louis until I went to college. I ended up going to Dallas for college. I came from a very large family, and a family that had a lot of roots in philanthropy. My father is very involved in charities and always loved being in that space. And so I think that's where my humanitarianism comes from, just learning that from my father. But I grew up in a house with all sisters, no boys. So it was a bit chaotic, a lot of hormones going on.
How many sisters? How many sisters?
I have three sisters.
I have five. I have you beat, but it's okay. We can share. I found that with big families, we're all about sharing, right? Did you find that growing up?
No,
Try to share with your
I
sisters?
don't think I did that very well. We had a very, I'm not sure well, later in life, I learned how to share, but we also had female dogs. So we had a lot of hormones in our house, but it was a lovely house and a lovely upbringing. We all have, I guess, baggage from, our lives, but I felt like I got pretty unscathed. But to answer your question about beauty and growing up, I did start modeling at a very, very young age. And at that age, you become very tender in what you're learning. And I wouldn't say this comes from my home, my family of origin, because my parents weren't really excited about my modeling career, but I was determined to do it, even that at that young age, which has that grit and persistence has kind of served me throughout my illnesses. But anyway, so I decided to go into the modeling space and I really loved it. But throughout my journey in the modeling space, I learned that my value, well, this is what that my belief was, that my value was external and also very transactional. And so in the modeling space, if you have a photographer that takes a liking to you and he wants to get you other work, he will say to you, how about you do a free job for me and I'll get you this client? How about we do a free shoot for your portfolio and I'll introduce you to so and so. And so I thought the world worked very much in the transactional space. And it comes lately, over the past 10 years, I've realized that's not the case at all. I just had learned that at a young age. So beauty to me was a little bit confusing, especially because people were paying me to be beautiful. But when I'd go to school after a photo shoot with makeup and looking what the world describes as very beautiful, I would get bullied from my classmates because they weren't out of school working as a model. And so I'd come back into the classroom and they would kind of pick on me because I was working, I was making money, I was, in St. Louis back then, I was in the newspaper, I was on billboards, I was, I was kind of all over, and that was intimidating to young girls. And so it was confusing.
Sure.
It was a very conflicting part of my life.
Of course. Wow. So you're talking like, so what was the exact age you started modeling?
I started modeling when I was 11, but I
11,
would
that's right.
say, well, I started to really start to miss school when I turned 16, because when you're a model younger than 16, you need a chaperone. So my
Okay.
mother chaperoned me to all my modeling jobs. And then when I was 16 and I got my own car, I could go by myself. And so I would miss a lot of school because I was a very good student, and I was able to miss a lot of school because I would do my homework. When I was getting prepped hair and makeup, I would be studying, which, by the way, wasn't consistent with a lot of the other models, but I took my job very seriously, but I also took my schoolwork very seriously. And so I would come back into the classroom, and my friends would pick on me about it.
Hmm. That's
So
that, and that had to be
you
hard.
can imagine how confusing that is, right?
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I think it was hard. It's hard enough to be a teenager and then to
Right.
be a teenager whose face is everywhere, right? That is very hard. And jealousy is huge. I mean, jealousy is already huge, and then you're kind of adding more to it. And gosh, that does sound so. At what point did you kind of start? Did you decide, okay, well, I've been doing this. Was there a moment where you decided I want to do this professionally for the rest of my life, or did it just kind of keep happening? You just kept getting jobs and kept doing it, which happens to a lot of people, I think. Like you happened into things and go, oh, this is working for me, you know?
I never considered it to be a lifelong career. I mean,
Okay.
it became a lifelong career, but I wanted to go to college, and I actually wanted to become a writer. And I applied to schools where I could really hone in on my writing, and I ended up not going there. I went to SMU, I went to Dallas. And then when I got to Dallas, really for the introduction to the school, I thought to myself, this is a bigger modeling market. This is a big city. I can work in this city. I have the right look in the city. And so really in my own, I guess in my own head, I was going back to, well, I can still make money here. And so I ended up modeling through college. And then when I graduated, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I said to myself again, I'll just keep modeling until I figure out what I want to do. Well, I'm still modeling.
And I want to talk about that in a minute, but I don't want to get too far ahead of us, who you're modeling for now, because it's one of the largest names in the business, right?
Yes.
So let's go back to, though, I do want to talk about, since this is very important to you and your activism. So when did you find out about your breast cancer? How old were you, and what did that feel like, Christine?
I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 41. It felt like an avalanche. It really was. I don't have any family history. Only 20%
Wow.
of patients, it's considered genetic. So there's 80% of the women that get breast cancer, nobody really knows why. And so I was in that group, but I didn't know that even at the time. And at 41, you don't imagine, for me, my perception was that cancer in general was an older person's disease. Breast cancer, unfortunately, not only is it on the rise, but it's becoming a younger person's disease. Don't ask me why, because I have no idea. But I was completely sideswiped. And the magnitude of the diagnosis and somebody telling me this is your percentile chance of survival, and now my external beauty is going to be gone, right? I'm going to lose my hair. I'm probably going to be sick. And that was quite an avalanche all at once.
Wow. Wow. Okay, you blew my mind. I have to be honest. I have literally said to me, I said to my sisters, said to myself, "Oh, we don't have a history in our family, really." So you just blew my mind. 80% does not have 80% of women who get breast cancer don't have a family history.
Correct.
That's not what I heard years ago. And I think we hang on to that, right? And so
Right.
I'm just kind of shocked. I'm just kind of shocked. So, wow, that is mind blowing. Thank you for sharing that really important information that you've taught me a lot already. But this is very important. And I hope people are listening and aware of that, because that means the mammograms are just so important, right? What other kind of tips can you give, or would you give a woman either who doesn't have cancer or who does? What would you give advice to women going through you know, in terms of looking out for cancer? And then if
Right.
they did have it, what would you say to them?
Well, I think that self-exams are probably the best defense, because if you get to know your breast, and if, especially for somebody like me who had dense breasts, that means it's kind of lumpy. And so if you get to know your breast and you feel on a regular basis the lumps that you already have, right? And if they change, or if they get bigger, if you have more, then it's the right time to get a mammogram. I think mammograms are critical. You know, insurance companies mess with the mammogram system a lot. Like when I think I was 35 and I had a mammogram, and I was fighting with my insurance company to get it covered, because I think that at that point they had changed it to 50. Now I think it's back to 40, but it's confusing as to why would they do that? Because it is very prevented, you know, it can
Right.
help. And also early stage cancers can be diagnosed with the mammogram. But I think self-exams are critical. Get to
Okay.
know your chest. Get to know your chest.
Get to know your chest. Great advice. And then for women who are in a position like you, do you have any, I guess, you know, I hate to say tips, you know, I mean, because you did go through chemo.
Yes.
Did you do radiation as well? They didn't have to do that? Okay.
No,
So,
I didn't do radiation. I had 28 rounds of chemo, and I had, well, over 20, I think about 28 surgeries total, but some of them were on my arm. So I had a lot of surgery, but I had, my situation was really unique because I did have mastectomies, and then I had implants. And then then I had breast implant illness, and then the implants, I had an infection in the implant, and so they were extracted. So I had never really seen my chest without breasts, even after mastectomy, because you have expanders, and then if you put implants in, you really wake up seeing a chest. And so it wasn't until June of 2020, just 3 years ago, not quite 3 years ago, when my implants were extracted and I didn't have a chest anymore. So that was a different type of emotional duress that I had to go through years after cancer. I went through cancer in 2012 and 2013 because I had 15 months of chemotherapy. And so then the breast implant illness happened in 2019, and ultimately my chest was excavated in 2020.
wow. Wow. So
Yeah, see?
can you talk more about that though? Because we talked a little bit about it, you know, before, but what was it like to have to go through that to this? I think you had said to me that the implant part was almost worse for you than the cancer. So it's kind of like what we were doing, what you did for beauty in the name of beauty and normalcy, right? Was actually making you it was making you sicker than the actual cancer. Is that kind of safe to say, or
Well,
need to
well, when
describe that experience?
they're very different, but the implants, I had a MRSA infection. MRSA infections can be deadly.
They're horrible. Yeah.
So I had a staph infection in my chest, which ultimately became a MRSA infection. So it was pretty imminent that I had to have that extracted. And if not, I probably could have and would have died. Chemotherapy was a totally different type of hell.
Mhm.
But they're both very dangerous and very deadly, and also very painful emotionally and
Right.
physically. And just the magnitude of being diagnosed, right? That's one sort of duress. And then the magnitude of the changes in your life, emotional and physical. And then the magnitude that life is never going to be the same. And then if you add on top of that, you know, the implant issue and then the extraction of that to then be concave, that's a whole nother paradigm of emotional change and
Mhm.
pain.
Yeah.
And so I think resilience is the only way that anybody can get through that type of trauma. For me, it was resilience and faith. And also, I had let go of, at that point, the desire to be dependent on society and society's accolades, and to square up with what society expected of me, right? To be that pretty girl. And at that point, I just said, well, I'm going to be who I am, and I'm going to use this way that I did it wrong, right? For 41 years, I did it wrong. I was very much enveloped in materialism, and very much enveloped in comparison and judgment, and how I looked compared to the other models or the other people in my community. And if I was carrying the right bag, if I was wearing the right clothes, and how I looked externally, I wasn't doing any of the internal work. I had like slipped away from, learning as a young adult that internal work is really critical. I never did the internal work. So I ended up having to do the internal work during chemotherapy, which was a difficult time to do internal work because you're violently ill and you're not sure that you're going to make it. So I ended up I also went through menopause at the same time too. So I had a lot of stuff going on.
Wow.
But fortunately for me, I really did rebuild my self-esteem and rebuild how I thought of myself during that phase of my life, which ultimately I probably saved me in 2020 when I ultimately had the extraction to my chest, because of course it rattled me to wake up to a concave chest after, 51 years of having a chest, and it came out of nowhere. I already did the breast cancer thing. I already did the chemo
Yeah.
thing. I already did the implants. I already did all the PICC lines and all of that stuff. And then to wake up and go, what just happened here and why? And so I couldn't make sense out of it. And so what I decided to do was go back into the modeling space, because when I started to post about the extraction, I started to post that I had a third and fourth mastectomy, which was really confusing in my own mind.
Yeah.
Other people reacted and they were like, oh my gosh, how do you deal with this? And the only way I knew how to deal with it was, one, had rebuilt my life on faith, and also had not rebuilt my life on what the world expects of us, which is, being dependent on what other people think of you and being dependent on external beauty. And so I said to myself, well, if I feel like this, I feel this kind of emotional pain. And of course, the physical pain was grotesque. But if I feel like this, imagine, and I have this community of people and I have this following on social media that's cheering for me and they're helping me. And then I have a supportive family. If I have all this and I'm getting messages from women who don't have that, then what about if I, collaborate with brands that I could showcase that losing my chest, it's okay. My value did not go away with losing my chest. My self-love didn't change. My self-esteem didn't change. And so I asked my modeling agency to go back to work, and ultimately I did go back to work, and I started working in New York Fashion Week as a model and Miami Swim Week, and ultimately with other big brands to say, guys, you got to work on your self-esteem. Your self-worth comes from inside. This external beauty and being obsessed with it, it's not going to work. It doesn't
Yes.
sustain you. It's like quicksand, right?
Yeah. 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 And I was very lucky because my mom didn't wear makeup. So I grew up with a mom who had beautiful long hair, but she was very, I mean, she sewed and she read, and she was very much and she was a woman of faith. And she really, just didn't put that focus on me. And so it was always kind of confusing for me when, I heard other people growing up with that kind of like pressure. And but then you read magazines and it's everywhere, you read magazines and you go, oh, now I get the pressure. So even if you're raised a certain way, it doesn't necessarily mean you're insulated from it, right? So I think it's amazing though that you were able to kind of you didn't get out of the industry. You're still in the industry and you're kind of changing it from the inside out. And I just want to applaud you for that, because
Thank
we
you. I
need
hope.
more Christines in the world. Really, really, seriously. So, well, can you tell more about, now you mentioned earlier you wanted to be a writer, you love writing. So how did the journey with cancer and with the breast implants and MRSA and almost dying, how much of that influenced your writing? Did you write throughout that? Did you journal? And then how did your book come about? So that's kind of two questions there.
Well, ironically, I'd never really been trained to write, but I wanted to write a book really badly after chemotherapy, because I thought, well, if I did this wrong, this thing called life, right? If I did this really wrong for this many years, maybe by me transforming and doing the shift that I did inside, maybe I could show that. And if I could show also that the women who stood up for me helped save my life, if I could show women supporting each other, maybe that would help communities around us.
Yes.
Because so often we turn on the TV and it's women tearing each other apart. I mean, just look at housewives from any state or any city.
Yeah.
And it's like you're getting paid to demolish other women's self-esteem. And so I thought, that's not what existed in my life. I'm going to show a different story. And if I can say women, if I can show women supporting women, isn't that a better story to show? Well, and I just put it out there and thought, well, if it's successful, it's great. If it's not meant to be out there. And then I realized after that process how difficult it was for me to process cognitive issues and my short-term memory had been impacted by chemotherapy. And so I thought, I need to fix this. I need to find a way to fix my brain after so much chemotherapy, because there is a thing called chemo brain. It exists. It's damaging to self-esteem, because you have to have faith, right, in your decision making and your cognitive abilities. And if you don't have faith in that, it can be really challenging, and it can really slice away your self-esteem. So I decided that at that point, I had a really strong self-esteem. So I thought, well, I'm just going to apply to Harvard and see if they'll take me in their master's program, because I think if I go back to school and I learn and I study, that will fix my brain. And so when I was going through in 2020, this MRSA infection, I was studying. I was a student at Harvard, and I was in my second year. And I'm telling you, I was in the hospital for more than most COVID patients at the time. I was in the hospital for the first time, March 25th of 2020, for the first infection for 5 days, then April 25th or something for 5 days, and then ultimately in June. And from my hospital bed, I was doing presentations for my master's program. I was doing speeches from my bed, because I realized that life had to go on. All these hits that I was taking, I didn't like it, but I could succumb to that, right? I could shut down, I could quit, and nobody would blame me. But what good would that do? How would that help the world? Who was I serving? And I wouldn't be helping myself. So I just kept having to go and do. And so I'll never forget, when I was doing my master's program, I was in the hospital. I had an IV in my arm, and I emailed one of my professors that morning, and I said, I know I'm presenting tonight, but I am in the hospital. I came in last night for an infection in my chest. And she said, oh, I'll just switch you with somebody else. And I said, no, that's okay. I'm prepared. I need to do this. And so I've got everybody on Zoom, everybody from my class, and they're all looking at me like, where are you? Do you have COVID? Because it was March 25th of 2020.
Wow.
Still in the hospital other than COVID patients. And there were 3 people on my floor. And so I think that showed a lot of people courage. I think people in my class, well, in fact, I know it did, because people in my class came up to me much later, throughout the years of my master's program, and just said, you know what, you showed us what real grit and determination looks like. And if you model that, not only does it show you bravery, it shows your children, it shows your friends, it shows your communities, it shows people online. And so I really think it's important to showcase the whole story, not just the highlight reels in social media, not just the highlight reels on interviews, because if it's a flattering story, how does that bring anybody into it? How does that help anybody? It doesn't.
Absolutely. Wow. So, and you're also showing, these, and I'm not saying all kids are like this, especially if you're a Harvard student, but, I was a college kid, and there were times when I was like, I don't want to take that exam. I was up late last night. I was at a party. It's like you're in a hospital delivering your work, and there's no excuse. Like, oh, you were up too late with your friends last night. So you are, and that's inspiring. So when did you start writing the book, and when did it come out? And can you tell more about the book?
So I wrote the book in 2015, and it was published in 2016, and it's been out for a while. And fortunately, it's a good book. It's not the best book, but I'm going to continue to write. I do love to write. Writing's been an outlet for me, just on a personal level, for a long time. And it's an important way to show stories, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's called Walk With Me.
Walk Beside Me.
Walk Beside Me. And it is available in many ways on your website, christinehandy.com, right? And then I think it's available on some other,
Amazon and Barnes and Noble, Target.
Yeah. So I have ordered it. I think, did I get it already? I think it's here actually, and I meant to bring it over, but I won't make you wait. But I'm excited about it, and I do read a lot, and I write a lot, and I think that's also something we have in common. I've written short plays and a lot of just a lot of articles that, for the website and things, and I love to write about people, and especially strong women, and sometimes people ask me like, like, why women, why only women, and for me it's because our stories have not been shared, and historically they just haven't been shared as much as men's stories. So we're still feeling those effects, so I'm still wanting to do that work, and you're definitely a woman with guts. So I appreciate you being here, Christine. So I would like to chat a little bit more about what you're doing now. So tell me more about your activism, what you're doing, what you want to do. I know you have an interview coming up on Monday, and so you're doing a lot of speaking. Can you tell us more about that?
I do love to speak. And I think that in many ways, I was prepared to be a speaker just from modeling for so many years. But I also love to model. It's been a lifelong career. And when I was a young model and saw older models, I didn't think that that would ever be me. But I'm glad that I'm in this space. I'm glad that I'm in the space doing what I'm doing, because I know for a fact it's making an impact on women. And ironically, a lot of women from different countries who aren't allowed to go out without a prosthetic after they've lost their chest. They really don't even have reconstructive abilities in those countries, but they're also not allowed to go out of their house to work, or really to anywhere without a prosthetic. And I hear it more and more from women from around the world. And it's maddening to me, and they see me walking in New York Fashion Week without, obviously without anything on my chest, in a very tight fitted dress or whatever that they have me walk in. And they're just amazed that I have the confidence, but that we're allowed to do that. And so it's important. I think it's important work. I also love to speak because, I love it to be conversational. I love questions because I want to know what resonates with people. But I also love to write because it's an outlet. It's another way to impact people. And I'm heavily, I will love the humanitarian work. Like, I watch the Iranian women right now. I don't know if you've been watching all of the women and the protests going on over there, but they inspire me.
Yeah, for sure.
For them and their bravery, it's nothing like I've ever done or ever seen. I mean, they could be, their life is at risk, right? My life is not at risk by modeling in New York Fashion Week, but their life is at risk. And so I commend people like that who really take a different risk that you and I will never know.
Right.
Those are the women that I really applaud. It's fun. It's exciting for me to watch them because they give me hope in the world.
Absolutely. Have you gotten the chance to travel much with your modeling, or is most of your modeling?
I do. And especially when I was younger, I did overseas, but I do a lot of it in New York and Miami right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, I used to when I was younger.
Cool. Well, yeah, the work they're doing is incredible, thank you for sharing that, because thank you for mentioning that. I would like to, in a moment, just open up for questions, but I do, before I do that, I would ask, is there a gutsy woman or some gutsy women that you would like to meet, but you haven't met yet?
Well, there's a whole group of women who are more vocal about what's going on in the breast implant space. And I touch on it, but people see me as a breast cancer survivor. People see me as a model. People see me as a humanitarian. People don't see me as a big voice in the breast implant space. Even though it affected me a couple of years ago, that's not what I started out doing. And so I applaud those women because they are making a lot of noise in a very difficult space. And what I mean by that is they have a lot of resistance, right? The plastics companies are making billions of dollars, right? By promoting a product to doctors who are also promoting a product. And I speak that from my own life. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer and I had a mastectomy, I was shown really pretty silicone saline implants, and I was shown textured ones, and I was told these textured ones, they won't move in the breast cavity, they're more comfortable, etc. I bought into that. Those textured implants, specifically the ones that they put in me, allergen BioSil textured implants, were recalled by the FDA because they are causing a specific type of breast cancer. So imagine having breast cancer, having reconstruction, having mastectomies, and putting it all back together, so to speak, as as best they could, and then having to take it all out because those very implants that were pitched to me are the very implants that are causing a specific type of breast cancer. So that's a bit confusing. And there's women out there who are shouting from the rooftops that plastics are way more dangerous than we know, that the FDA is not doing their job. I'm not doing that. I'm not that voice. but I see these women doing it, and I see them getting not in trouble, but maybe shadowed by, in certain socials, like trying to push down their voice. And it makes me insane.
Yeah.
It's just, it's unfair, it's unjust. And it makes me want to get louder in that space. But those are the women that are doing incredible things. And I want to jump on board with them because they're the heroes.
Absolutely. And since I met you, you inspired me to read more about this because
I saw something you published about it.
yeah, it wasn't about it's just really I didn't have the experience. I didn't know anyone who had this happen to them personally. I do have a friend who is also concave chested after breast cancer, who's now your biggest fan too, my friend Melissa. And she hadn't heard of you before and just is so inspired and chose, not to do implants, I think, ever. And so she was smart, right? And I'm not saying you're not smart or these other women aren't smart, but I'm saying they're not maybe as educated and they haven't heard those voices because those voices are being totally not silenced, but just quieted because there's so much money in the plastic industry. And we're seeing the effects of plastic everywhere in the environment. And so we're killing the oceans and we're killing women and it's somehow okay, so I think I want to amplify your voice, and I hope everyone listening today is going to share that knowledge, right? Because that's what this is for, is to share that knowledge. And I was shocked. I was shocked also by when I did some more reading about it, just the doctors, especially in Florida. As we know, Florida is, or as I like to call it, the state of retirement. But no,
I live in Miami.
No. But I mean, there's a lot going on there that it's not happening. It's happening in the rest of the country. But one article I read is about how it's kind of starting in Florida and the real kind of, plastic culture that we can see there and spreading and there's not enough, I think, activism. So thank you for your activism. And I think and applaud those women too. So for the remainder of our time, is there anything else you wanted to share before I kind of open up for questions from the people who are here in our live Zoom? Okay. And then I will actually ask our participants if they want to chat. They can send me a chat here if you guys don't want to share it out loud. If you want to ask a question, feel free to just unmute yourself. And if there aren't more questions, then I will probably just end with some information about what's coming up with Women with Guts. But does anybody have any questions? I think I see Tori. Go, Tori.
Hi, Christine. That was fantastic to listen to. I was nodding through the entire thing, just going, oh, like that. Just everything was resonating with me. Now, my question is this. Growing up nowadays, beauty, I think, is shoved in the face, even more so with these young girls. Because when we were growing up, there wasn't all these phones and things like that. So it's the boobs, it's the balm, it's the lips, it's everything. Now, you've done so well to reverse everything that you learnt and then remove the old shell of you and become who you're meant to be. And it's like you were forced to do that. And what a great journey and what a great story. And it's definitely going to help loads of people. What would you say to a young girl who is about 18, who is, taking selfies and filters and things like that? What do we say? Because I have teenage girls within my life that I worry about them because there is this obsession, even more so, with how we look. What could you say to them now in this day and age? What would you like to say to them?
I love to talk to young women because I think that's the best audience for me because I lived it, right? I mean, I was that person. I was that model who was addicted to the world and the world's accolades and the next modeling job. And, when I was a guest model, it wasn't big enough. I needed a bigger job and I didn't want to be on that billboard. I wanted to be on a different billboard. And I mean, that's not flattering. So what I like to tell young women is that it's okay to take the selfies because I don't think you can say to them, just get rid of the phone because it's not realistic. But if you say to them, okay, if you're going to do the selfie, be honest. Like, don't use all the filters. If you're having a bad day, share, because that's helpful to other people to feel like that's not just a highlight reel. Don't make it look like a life that's perfect, because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But if that's what people are using their social media for, which by the way is why people like my social media, because there was an article about me that said it's Christine Handy, the honest Instagrammer. If I'm in the hospital, I'm showing I'm in the hospital. If I'm doing a presentation from the hospital room with a PICC line in my arm and I'm crying like a child, I put that on my social media. It's not flattering, but it's not a popularity contest. And so if people are going to take the selfies, and by the way, I do selfies all the time because I get paid by brands to promote certain things, and people want to see what I'm doing. People want to see that I'm in New York. People want to see who I'm with. My boyfriend doesn't really like it. He doesn't really want to be on it. So I kind of hide that. But, I think it's important to say to them, if you're going to do it in an authentic way. Because when you don't do anything in an authentic way, it slices your self-esteem. Because it's almost like lying. And I talk about that with issues that are going on. So many people say, well, I've not had breast cancer. I'm not in alignment with it. It's not a focus of mine. Well, I've never been an Iranian woman either. But if we ignore a fight, aren't we participating?
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's just true. So if we can't collectively fight together, we're part of the problem.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be part of the problem anymore.
Thank you.
Totally.
That's what I would tell young girls.
Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. If we ignore a fight, aren't we participating? Oh, that was beautiful, Christine. And thank you for that question, Tori. And related, Wanda said, Christine, you're a beautiful person inside and out. I applaud you for being honest and real. And pointed out that in the old days, women would just have to do a complete hysterectomy, right? Not if you had this as breast cancer a patient. Her question was, if your daughter wanted implants, what would you say? Would you discourage her? And are there any implants that are user friendly?
Well, one of my sons called me recently, I have young sons, young adult sons. And he said, one of my friends is getting implants and I'm really against it, because he saw what happened to me, right? So of course he sees the negative part of it. And I said, well, I wouldn't judge her, because the world is promoting this, right? It's hard to break away from that, especially as a young woman. I would say to her how you feel. I would say, I'm not a proponent of this. And I would get background information and share it with her. Like, this is the information that's out there. I just want you to make sure you are knowledgeable about the information. So you're not saying to her, I'm going to judge you. I'm going to forsake you. I'm going to leave you. I'm going to not be by your side, but I want you to be equipped. And then if you decide to do it, it's your decision. I don't have a daughter, so I can't put myself in that position, but I have nieces. And if they were doing this, I would have a very serious conversation with them and just say, you saw what happened to me. I think you need to be aware of the information and just and teach people, empower them with the knowledge.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for these questions. These are great questions. And
I
appreciate it.
I'm not I don't like to judge people, because we don't know where they come from. And I don't mean like what state or what city. We don't know what kind of familial background or what kind of mother or environment they lived in. So who are we to judge?
Right.
I don't like to put that on anybody. And so if somebody wants to have implants, it's like, we can't really say this is not something you should do. Everybody's coming from a different place, emotionally, physically, spiritually.
But they should know the risk. And that's the issue, is that they don't
Well,
know.
knowledge is
Most
power.
people don't know the risk. Yeah,
I didn't know
exactly.
the risk. I wasn't taught the risk.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's on me. I don't think that's fair. The
I would
FDA,
agree with that.
the FDA, well, in Europe, the FDA recalled these exact same implants in 2011, the ones that were inside of me. Had the United States FDA recalled the implants in 2011, I would have never had the issue I had.
Wow.
So that's not on me.
No, it's on, yeah, absolutely. And that's why we need to put pressure onto our elected officials and make sure we're electing, I don't know, maybe some more women into office to represent half of the country, we're getting there. We're getting there. It's more diverse than ever before, but our Congress and Senate, but Christine Handy for Senate, just saying. Christine Handy, 2024 wins the next election.
I try to stay away from politics. I've got many other fights. Not that I'm ignoring it.
Right. Well played there. And I do want to say really quickly, I actually love the state of Florida. I love Miami. I may come visit this next winter. I'm not kidding. My niece and I love it down there. But yeah, it's fun to make a little fun of Florida.
It is.
We make fun. I'm from Southern Indiana. We make fun of Kentucky too. So, Kentucky makes fun of us. So it's just all good natured ribbing, I guess. But yeah, I thank you so much for your time. Are there any other questions from our audience members before we kind of draw to a close here today? Any other questions? Not seeing any hands raised. So I think we've heard from everyone in the audience, but I do want to share quickly that I am going to be doing another interview on May 10th at 2 p.m. also with Dr. Milagros Hernandez, and she's going to be talking about her breast cancer journey. So I hope that you can come back and join us. We'll be talking about, because the reason she started her business was the exact same reason you're doing your work, which is she as a medical doctor. So when you're saying, oh, it's not necessarily my fault, she's a medical doctor. And she didn't understand the risks of, in her case, she believes it was the cosmetics, it was deodorant. And now we know that there is a link between some deodorant and breast cancer, right? And so she is that's where she said, why aren't there more products out there that are totally organic, right? So I've always used pretty natural ingredients in my in my deodorant. I mean, my cosmetics, that's the whole other thing. But I try to, but for her, it was just not even a question. She completely gutted her whole life. I mean, anything that was at all cancer causing went out the window, so I learned a lot from her as well. And I applaud her and you for sharing your journeys, because a lot of people don't want to, but you're helping people with every story that you tell. And I just want to thank you again. So I want to wish you all the best, Christine. And
thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll have this on our website and on the YouTube page. And I just wish you all the best and take care. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Have a great day. I'm going to
thank you. Bye-bye.
turn this off.